we break down the initial 53 of the Philadelphia Eagles, some practice squad additions as well in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
He looks right, he fires, and it's intercepted! It's intercepted! It is intercepted by the Eagles! What a play! Snap. He's back, he's gonna run. He's in! Touchdown! Jalen Hurts! 20. Westbrook takes it. Look for running back. Up to the 25, the 30, to the 35-40, 45 midfield, 45-40, 45-40. Ryan Westbrook! He's going! He's gone! Touchdown! 15-10! The Eagles win! The Eagles win! The Eagles win!
It's all birds, all the time.
And of course, we're going to break down the 53-man initial roster because we know it isn't going to be the same roster when they go into Brazil and play the Packers. It's going to change. They still have 3 spots open on the practice squad, so we know that's going to be different as well. But we're here tonight to break down what's going on, what has happened. How much we were wrong in terms of certain players that stayed. James Bradbury, but
only one of us was wrong. If you remember, I gave you my list.
Yes, I know you gave me your list. You gave me your list. Okay, I was wrong on that, but
we were hopeful.
We were hopeful. I don't think there was really many surprises in terms of the roster and everything. And I'm gonna go through the roster quick. Right here on who was kept. So if we look at the quarterback room, it's chalk there. Jalen Hurts, Kenny Pickett, Tanner McKee. The running backs, same. Saquon Barkley, Kenneth Gainwell, Will Shipley. You look at the receiver room. So, of course, Jahan Dotson is the new addition there, which, Paris Campbell is not on the roster. So you have A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith, Jahan Dotson. You have Johnny Wilson and Britton Covey. So there's 5 there. And then you look at the offensive line, Mailata, Fred Johnson, Dickerson, Keegan, Juergens, Becton, Lane Johnson, Tyler Steen, Darian Kennard. We kind of were basically pretty right with those guys. I thought Toth was going to be kept.
I did not.
But, listen.
So we're going to get into it, but I think we had seen everything we were going to see with Toth.
Well, that's why I'm going to ask you here because I just let you know all the offense before we get to, and the specialists are the same of what we knew that was going to be Mann, Elliott, and Lovato. But when you look at the offense, anything that kind of stood out to you, something that, is a little bit different than what you thought when you look at the original offense that they've kept on the initial 53?
I think that they were a little bit light in the wide receiver category. Now, I don't know who you would have kept in the place once you got Jahan Dotson. I was not expecting them to keep 3 tight ends. I don't think any of the other tight ends really set themselves apart. I only put E.J. Jenkins on my list because I felt like I needed a 53rd player, and he was going to be it. The running backs, there was no surprise. The quarterbacks, there was no surprise. I was actually surprised they didn't keep as many linemen. I thought they would keep maybe 1 or 2 more just because that is such a taxing position. But you look at guys, like Johnny Wilson. Johnny Wilson was not going to clear waivers. He just wasn't. So what do?
He had nobody claimed off of waivers on anyone they cut, and they did not claim anybody.
Yeah, so, the offense is exactly kind of what I thought it was going to be. Now, what moves they make from here, who knows? I mean, the Jahan Dotson trade, which happened after we went off the air last week.
Yeah. Which is funny because we were talking about players and, we were saying how he's like the number 1 guy we wanted the Eagles to get and everything. And then that Thursday, the day after we do the pod, he gets traded to the Eagles. So, if you want to talk about that trade real quick, we can. For me looking at it, they gave up a 3rd round pick, which they have 2 3rd round picks in next year's draft. They did get a 5th round pick and they got rid of 2 7ths. So for me, it's you get a young receiver, 24-year-old receiver. For me, I understand he's had a little trouble with drops and he's kind of, wore out his welcome in Washington, but it's a new coaching staff. So the problem is who drafted him wasn't there. And listen, he was expendable in terms of the Commanders and for an in-division trade. Listen, he has the playmakers that he didn't have in Washington and he can get open. I love the deal. I'm a Penn State guy, so I love the deal because he's a Penn Stater.
It's the same stuff we were talking about last week. So Dotson was not finding success in Washington. It seemed like he was going to be the fourth wide receiver at best, and from a former first round pick, that's really an undersell. So then when you look at what you gave up for him, you got a first round pick for very little, making you, and you had question marks at the wide receiver 3 position. So now you don't. He is the best wide receiver 3 in the NFL. If you stack up receiving cores, there is no stronger wide receiving core in the NFL right now than Jahan Dotson as your third wide receiver. So, I mean, I'm sure you can tell me Chicago's got a pretty good one. Houston's got a pretty good one. Like, we can play this game. But again, Jahan Dotson has also never really had anybody throwing him the ball, like, seriously. Like, look at the quarterbacks he's had throwing him the ball. I just think it's just one more weapon for Jalen Hurts. It's one more way that Jalen Hurts just has to distribute the ball. Like, he can have an MVP caliber season if he just distributes the ball. He doesn't have to do too much this year.
Yeah, and for me, I think the biggest thing looking at this offense and looking at the way it's structured, I still think there's ability. Now, we'll get to the practice squad and everything. They added 2 tight ends there. They're going to come into game day with 3 tight ends. They'll elevate somebody from the practice squad.
And that's where EJ Jenkins is, by the way, which is kind of exactly where I thought he should end up. And
you also have to they added Nick Gates to the practice squad and
he will be a call up.
He will be a call up. So, the offense is kind of what we thought. There really wasn't any like, oh my goodness, look at that deal, because we weren't sure with Tyler Steen if he was going to potentially be an IR candidate. Anaya Smith being IR was a little, I guess that was a little surprising after the game against Minnesota, but I figured they would keep him. I thought they were going to keep 6 receivers. They kept 5 and then put Anaya Smith on IR. So
I did not, because Britton Covey is not even really a receiver. He is a returner.
I believe they'll use him more than you think.
But again, think about it. There's only one football. So you have to get Saquon his carries. You have to get AJ and Devontae their catches. You have to give Jalen his opportunity with the ball. You got to be able to check down to Dallas Goedert. You got to be able to check down to Jahan Dotson. You have 6 weapons already. Britton Covey is not going to get a ton of opportunities with the offense.
Yeah, listen, I understand that. Like, you don't think he's going to get much opportunity, but to me, I think there are ways to get him the ball, whether it's, short little routes. I think he is a player that can definitely give you something. And I want to take a look at the defense now. So let's go over the defense of what the Eagles on the initial 53. You have a defensive line. You have Jalen Carter, Jordan Davis, Milton Williams, Moro Jomo, Marlon Tui-Pelotu, Thomas Booker the fourth. I was very glad to see Booker make the roster.
Booker was my surprise.
What?
Booker was my surprise. I knew Tui-Pelotu was going to make the team. Again, he wasn't going to pass through waivers. He's too big of a body. He wasn't not going to pass through waivers. Booker, I think, had a good preseason, and that's why he made the roster. Same thing with Patrick Johnson. Patrick Johnson had an amazing preseason. He earned his roster spot.
Which I'll get to that. I'll go through the rest of them here. Bryce Huff, Brandon Graham, Jalex Hunt, Zach Bond, Jeremiah Trotter Jr., Devin White, Nakobe Dean, Ben Van Sumeren, Josh Sweat, Nolan Smith, Patrick Johnson, as you just stated. And then the corner safety room is Darius Slay, Eli Ricks, CJ Gardner-Johnson, James Bradbury, Reed Blankenship, Avonte Maddox, Tristan McCullum, Isaiah Rogers, Keely Ringo, Quinyon Mitchell, Cooper DeJean. So they did keep a lot. They kept a lot of defenders. Now
11 in the corner room, in the secondary.
In the secondary, the safety and corner room. So to me, I think they did that because, one, if you took a look at what the Carolina Panthers did, they claimed 4, or they signed 1 and claimed 3 other cornerbacks today. If Eli Ricks is cut, I believe he's probably claimed, because if you happen to look at the players that they claimed, they were all guys who were around 6'1" area, maybe a little bigger than that. They wanted bigger, longer corners, which Eli Ricks is. So My thought is he would have wound up being claimed. My only thing with it is, in terms of looking at keeping a James Bradberry, who one doesn't play special teams, and a guy like Eli Ricks, who isn't the best special teamer, you letting go of a guy like Josh Jobe, who is a special teamer. So there is that. But again, this roster can change. And looking at it, I am glad that a guy like Patrick Johnson did stay because he can play special teams, but also he showed a little bit in the pass rush room this preseason.
I mean, he literally was responsible for 2 of the preseason wins.
Yeah, because you also have to look at it this way too. Nolan Smith really didn't give you much so far this preseason. It's been a little underwhelming when you look at what he's done. And he was in there late in the final preseason game against like second, mostly third stringers. And he wasn't really getting the pass rush you would have thought he would be getting. So it's a little underwhelming. You're not going to give up on him. He's a second year. He was undersized last year. He's trying to put on the weight to get to that point. And listen, we've learned with Brandon Graham, you don't give up on first round picks right away after year 2. And again, you're going to have big years you need a big year out of Jordan Davis, see what he's got. Nolan Smith, these guys.
Williams is due for a contract.
Milton Williams is due for a contract. So there's a lot there. It's very interesting, but I am very glad to see 2 things. Tristan McCollum make the roster. I like his potential. I really like what I saw out of the preseason with him. And 2, Quinyon Mitchell changed his number to 27. So that was also nice to see.
So before we get into that, let's talk about Bradberry. You and I had this conversation. Yes, because you were convinced that Bradberry was not going to be on the roster. He was too much of a cap casualty. There was no way. And they tried to trade him. They absolutely tried to trade him. There is nobody that wants him, but you cannot just let that much dead money go.
No.
You just can't. So you use him for his I mean, at one point he was a good corner in this league. So use him to train up your young guys. Just because he can't physically do it anymore. You know what I mean?
Yeah, so I get that. But I think the way they look at it is maybe something will come if an injury comes up that he becomes available, because honestly, I get it. They're on the hook for the money, no matter whether they keep him, they release him, they trade him, they have to pay him. It's guaranteed. So I get that. And my question is, if they keep all these defensive backs, what players don't play? Is James Bradberry a potential inactive?
Yes.
So it's to look at when you take a look at this roster and the way it's constructed right now, of course.
McCollum doesn't play. He's one of the last guys. I mean, he plays special teams.
I think you play McCollum because honestly, the way I see it, I trust Tristan McCollum at safety than I do James Bradberry.
So do I.
So, it's going to be interesting to see what happens, like an Eli Ricks or a Bradberry, and what they decide to do. A Cooper DeJean, is he potentially, he didn't have the greatest game against the Vikings. Again, it's his first preseason game out of being out of action for a couple of weeks with a hamstring injury. Do they potentially inactivate him for a week or 2, depending on him getting up to speed, basically? So it's going to be interesting to see what they do. To go over the practice squad additions, now they do have 3 spots left. They can go up to 17 because they have 1 international player who does not count on the practice squad.
Oh, cool.
Each team is awarded that. So the practice squad additions are basically, it's everyone who played except for 2 new additions. So we have Tyrion Davis-Price, Dylan McMahon.
Which doesn't, so let's break that down. That does not surprise me because, I mean, he was a workhorse.
Yeah. He's a very big power back, and it's good to have him on the practice squad in case you need him for a week or 2. I really like that. I liked when they signed him as a futures, just because I like his size. I like what he does. So it was good to have him back. Dylan McMahon, the draft pick that they released, the center for the 6th round pick. So glad to have him back on the practice squad. Learn, keep growing and everything. Lakin Vakalahi, he is the international player, so he's of course going to be on the roster all year. Paris Campbell, another good veteran to have on the practice squad just in case. So it's good to have him back. Brandon Smith, EJ Jenkins is back on the practice squad, which is totally fine with me there. Andre Sam, Safety Andre Sam is back. Gabe Hall, defensive tackle, which I'm happy about. I really like his development. I want to see him grow more. Oren Burks, it's good to have him on the practice squad because he was starting to come a little bit into form. He missed a lot of training camp with an injury, and he looked good. So I like to have the veteran inside linebacker on the practice squad. Will Greer is there as just an arm in a quarterback there. So, and he knows the offense. So basically,
I'll be honest. That one was interesting to me a little bit. I could see, and again, you're looking at some of the guys that are being cut around the league. Your crappy zappies, things like that.
Taylor Heineke was just traded to the Chargers.
Yeah. So I think that keeping Will Greer there, like you mentioned, he knows the offense.
Yeah.
Sets the tone for if we were to trade either Noodle Arm or, Long Neck.
I like how you have nicknames for him. To finish out the practice squad, I mentioned Nick Gates already. Caden Stearns, which is good to have him if he gets himself healthy. Potentially he's still a young player if he can kind of get himself back into form there. And then the two additions that weren't with the Eagles during the preseason. Well, one was with the Eagles for the last couple of years. That was Jack Stoll is back. He's on the practice squad. Again, a veteran. He's a very good blocker, can be that tight end 3, can be elevated. So good to have him back. And then Marcus Roseme Jackson, a receiver from Georgia, and he was with the Washington Commanders. So, a young player, developmental player there. But
yeah, if you don't make the Commanders wide receiver room after they get rid of a Jahan Dotson, you're going to stay on the practice squad, sir. But he also is the one that I think could easily be cut when the Eagles go and sign Jack Driscoll, who was just cut today as well.
I'm sorry, but I don't want to do that. I'm kind of over that, really, honestly. But remember, the Eagles do have 3 spots. So they have 3 open spots on their practice squad. They could sign players. So we'll see what they do with those last couple spots. And, if they happen to release anybody on the active roster. But, looking around the league, looking at the way the Eagles have built the roster, I have a question here for you. Is this roster better than last year's roster as it is constructed as of right now?
Yes.
Week 1 last year, week 1 this, because I know how you always go. You look and see how the rosters stack up. Are they better than they were last year? And
yes.
And why are they better? What do you see that is
so
better in terms of?
I look at overall depth. I look at overall. So
even with losing a Jason Kelce and a Fletcher Cox.
Yes. So you already had the replacements ready for those starting spots, but now you have guys who are you had a battle at right guard between 2 absolute studs. You've got linebacker depth for the first time in years. Now, whether or not any of them are starter quality, we've yet to see. You've got depth in the corner room. You have depth along the defensive line, and it's guys who are ready to show out. Running back, you actually have a good running back as running back 1. You don't have a 1A, 1C situation like you did last year. Tight ends, you're rolling with the same situations. And then your wide receiver room is absolutely ridiculous. Ridiculously good. Not to mention, and correct me if I'm wrong. Last year, we gave you go special teams. Man was not on the week 153.
No, a Sipos. Remember they had him on the practice squad.
So there you go. Right then and there. That's why this team is better, because we have a better punter this year.
So it's, to me,
what do you think?
It's tough because when you lose guys like Jason Kelce and Fletcher Cox and Hassan Reddick, I think it's close. The roster in terms of talent, they're a young team. They're a young roster. But if they get those step up from players like a Nakobe Dean, a Jordan Davis, a Nolan Smith, then it's a very different story. But I think offensively, what it can be is the defense, maybe they're not as talented as it was when they started last year. Now the talent was there last year, but then the overall productivity wasn't. The talent wise may not be there, but the productivity in terms of playing as a sound defensive unit, in my opinion, is going to be better because of Vic and what he's brought so far. So, but offensively, I think offensively they are a lot better with what they've added in a Saquon and, a Mekhi Becton. He slides over to play guard for you, and you have Jurgens, who was drafted as the replacement for Jason. So, and of course you get the Dotson trade. So the way I look at it, I think the offense is leaps and bounds better because one, the play caller is going to be able to throw different wrinkles in there, is going to be able to help the quarterback.
The
plus
play caller is better.
Yeah. So the play call as a team, I think they are better as talent wise, and what they have, on the field may not be as good yet because we just don't know in terms of some of these players and what steps they're going to take this year. So for me, it's close, but again, they did start 10-1 last year. So I know they had the big fall off.
I think that, we mentioned that the coordinators are better. That's obvious because you actually have coordinators who have coordinated in the NFL. You've got guys who are, notorious for being the history of an entire defense, and he has proteges all over the place. So that's the first thing. The second thing is you mentioned that, all these guys retired and, we lost some of it. Yeah, they did. But that also means we got younger. So the NFL is a very fast game. Not saying that Jason Kelce still could not play at an elite level because obviously he could. Not saying that Fletcher Cox still could not play at an elite level because he could. But now the game gets faster again. Now the game gets to be speed and power and all these things that thrive in the NFL. You're not – look, I love Jason Kelce. I love Fletcher Cox, but you're not holding spots for them when these new guys are ready to take over.
Yes. But I also think, too, we've clamored with what they've done the last couple of years. And 2022, it worked, getting some veteran free agents middle of the season and a guy like Linval Joseph and Ndamukong Suh.
But did it really work?
It did work because their run defense, it helped them stabilize the run defense. And listen, they went to the Super Bowl. So, yeah, it did work. Last year, it did not work. Anybody they brought, Bradley Roby, Shaq Leonard, no matter who it was, it just did not work. And it was a point of they needed to get younger. And unfortunately, with retirements of Kelce and Fletcher Cox and the trade of Hassan Reddick, they were able to get
a lot of guys in the room already. They just weren't able to play them.
But when they're able to get younger like that, it helps because the overall age of the team is younger. It's one of the youngest that they've been in some time, but it's good to have, and you still are sprinkled in there with some veterans that are leaders and everything with that. So you still have the veteran leadership there, but you sprinkle in a lot of youth and a lot of players who aren't in their late 20s, early 30s that you're signing and trying to hope that you get one last hurrah out of them. And I think that's big when you look at this team.
I think that this team is now fully prepared to develop together like the new core. You know what I mean? Like I think about the Philadelphia Phillies as they were, in the 2008 regime. And there was a point where, Jimmy Rollins had come up and Chase Utley had come up and Ryan Howard couldn't come up. And look, we love those guys, but there was a time where they were kind of just holding everything back. So you have to move on to the next generation. And there were a couple down years, and now we have our next generation. I don't think that this is a down year for the Eagles. Obviously, we have arguably the most talented top to bottom roster in the NFL. I just think that these guys have to see the field now. I think that Kobe Dean has to see the field. I think that Milton Williams needs all the extra snaps so he can show that, hey, I'm going to get a humongous contract. I think that all these guys are now they're going to see the field and they're going to produce. And if they don't, well, that's also information for us.
Yeah. No, I'm very interested and intrigued. I say the same thing every year. It's kind of true, but I want to see the way they develop and the way they, this first game is going to be tough. You have a tough matchup.
It's a tough game.
And, it's you're in Brazil, so you're not at home. It's a neutral game. It's going to be tough against a really good team who ended the season last year on fire, and they basically bring everybody back on offense, essentially, except for Josh Jacobs is new, but essentially it's the same core that they have there, and they were firing all cylinders last year.
And they paid Jordan Love, so he's got a lot to prove.
Yeah, there's a lot there. There's a lot of storylines when you look at
which
that
we'll
game
break down next week.
What?
I said, which we'll break down next week.
Yes, next week we will break it down
along with our season predictions, I'm guessing.
I think that is something that we definitely have to do when we have the guest on to break down the Packers game for the first half of the show, and then the second half we'll get our analysis, a little bit of what the game is, and we got to get our prediction on what we see the Eagles doing this year. I know I kind of have in my mind what they're going to be, but may change, but I don't think it will. But we're going to have Andy Herman on. He's going to be our guest next week as we break down the Eagles versus the Green Bay Packers. He is the owner of the Pack a Day podcast, writer of Packer Report 66. So he's been on our show before. We had him on 2022 when the Eagles played the Packers. Great guest, great guy. So I'm really excited to have him back on to break down our very new show too. We have our new segment. It won't be the weekly report next week. When we have him on, it's going to be the inside swoop. So we're going to get the inside tidbits on the Green Bay Packers and get all the news and updates and kind of what they're seeing over there on their end. And then we will break down the Eagles' end after that. So it should be a good show. It should be awesome. Make sure that you are following, you're subscribing. Make sure you hit the notification just so you know when we go live, and all our posts on X, IG, Facebook, all that, you are up to date. And also the Philly sports trips, the Saquon, October 20th, the return to MetLife. We are again partnering with Philly sports trips on that trip out of Allentown. So you don't have to go to Philly to get the bus. There is one bus leaving from Allentown. So make sure that if you want to get on the bus, if you want to go to the game, make sure when you sign up for it, make sure you hit the Allentown location so you are able to come on the bus. It is limited because we're only doing one trip this year. So make sure if you want to go, make sure you get on there and you get those tickets and you get those locked up so you are set to go. It's going to be an awesome time. Some former Eagles will be there. It's going to be a fun time to root on Saquon and the Eagles at MetLife.
It's going to be a great time. It's going to be a great season. I'm very excited. And like I said, the roster that we broke down, I mean, we weren't really surprised. That was exciting. That was a peaceful day today. I was like, I was like waiting for 4:00 to hit. I'm like, oh no, we're good.
Yeah. Yeah.
They didn't try to outthink themselves this year.
No, there wasn't any super big surprises. So, so it's good. We'll see how the roster shapes up. There could be a couple changes, which most likely there will be when we come on next week, and then also right before the game. But you know where to find us. Make sure you're following. We always end it with 2 words. Go Birds.
This is Matt Ware. Hey, for all the Eagle content you need, go follow All About the Birds. They do a damn thing. Check them out.
Hey, Eagles fans, I may be in Tampa, but I know where to find the best Eagles content out there. Check out my friends at All About the Birds.
Philadelphia, what's up? This your boy Freddie Mitchell, a.k.a. Fred X. It's all about the bird.
All birds all the time. All birds all the time.
All About the Birds provides you with weekly analysis, game recaps, informative interviews, and it's all birds all the time.